Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 24th, right? All back from vacation. February 24th, 2025 meeting of the Averill Park Board of Directors. Everybody can stand up. Thank you very much. Oh my gosh. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Jim's already on his way up, so we're going to get the superintendent's report.
Good evening. A few things on the report that I just want to update the board about. First off, as we've talked about in the past, we are part of a health insurance consortium with other school districts. That's going to come up a lot as we enter this budget season. You're going to see that from Carrie a little bit tonight, a little foreshadowing about some of our expenses that are increasing. As a group, the main part of what we do is to keep our costs down. Wanted to let you know that there is a recent explosion, obviously, of the weight loss drugs and some specialty drugs. And this is leading to significant increases in costs, and I mean, extremely significant. So I'm very happy to say, as a collaboration of school districts, so our consortium, as well as NICET, CSDA, we are in the process of getting an MOA together and signed. Actually, the attorney who's representing the consortium is Jeff Honeywell, so that's nice for us. That is pretty much in the final stages of it, but it is really an agreement really of labor unions and management and districts all coming together to try to do what we can to minimize the cost of these drugs, which are skyrocketing. There'll be more information coming on that. I really just wanted to give you a heads up it was coming. Once the MOAs are signed by all the units, we'll get that on the agenda for your approval, and there'll be some updates in board notes. I just kind of want to let you know, again, as we go through another difficult budget season, that we are doing everything we can, including working with our health insurance consortium to keep the cost of the drugs down that we are paying for. Secondly, as you know, we're in the process of implementing an anonymous reporting system. It's up and running right now. Also working with the county on the threat assessment process. This is going to be consistent for all, not just our schools, but schools throughout the county. Again, it's a county-wide initiative, really a statewide initiative. I just wanted to bring this up. It's not a positive story, obviously, but that quote is from an ABC News story. It happened since our last meeting. All right, so there was a school shooting that was avoided through an anonymous reporting tip in a district. So again, these are the reasons we're doing these things. We are trying to stay as proactive as we can. We've done a lot, as you know, in terms of safety, from our $100,000 projects to a whole variety of things, our capital projects in the vestibules. There's a lot of things we are doing. We don't talk a lot about them, as you know, because we try not to discuss safety too much in public. But this one is something that is very public. We're very happy that we've got to this point, very happy with the product so far, and fortunate that we have people in the district who've been in other districts who've implemented it, so we have some experience and learning curve there. So just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and again, unfortunately, there's some relevance there. And then finally, for report, this is going to be a little bit unusual, so I apologize in advance, but we had a lot of public comment last meeting about music scheduling, so I did ask Heath to prepare a comment or a response, excuse me. And I wanted to take a moment, only because I feel like it's probably important to read this. It's rather long, and that's why I say somewhat unusual that we read something this long at the meeting. But I wanted to make sure we got this out for the benefit of the board as well as the public. Again, this is coming from Heath. Obviously, we've looked at it and gone back and forth to make sure it's accurate and correct. But in response to the expressed concerns related to music scheduling at the last Board of Education meeting, I am providing some data and background. There are students each year who do need to make choices between taking an instrumental or vocal music course or an AP honors or accelerated course. In the end, this traditionally is most impactful for instrumental students, as many of them tend to be accelerated in their academic work and aim to take multiple advanced courses in a single year. Again, the I here is Heath. That said, I am confident each year we build a schedule which maximizes student placements in the courses required for graduation while minimizing student conflicts across the schedule in an equitable manner. Over the years, we have mapped out placements for every singleton course, which gives us the statistically lowest conflict rate, including all music courses. Singleton courses are loosely defined as any course that we can only offer once. Our honors courses in general are singleton courses. There's a lot of those where we talked a little bit about the French elimination. French is considered a singleton for us. The majority of our students take Spanish. So that term is really talking about those courses that are literally singletons offered one time in a schedule. As we engage in the scheduling process, we evaluate the metrics in order to identify areas of concern. This process includes reconfiguring singleton placements in higher conflict areas, running new metrics, and then completing a new analysis of the schedule. It's a constant process and a cycle. In the end, we publish a fully maximized schedule. In fact, we tend to lock in at about a 93% conflict-free rate, which is better than most of the schools that we are in our NAIR achieve. That 93% rate means that, in general, when the schedule is locked in, 93% of the students have schedules that are all set. There's no conflicts. The rest then have to be hand scheduled and has to have some work done to them. So some specific things to keep in mind with the music conflicts. This is a key part. As a school with 865 students, almost all of our APs, honors, and auxiliary courses are singletons. We don't have multiple sections of those courses because of our size. This means that there's only one chance in the 8-block schedule for a student to be placed. In addition, many of these courses have multiple placement restrictions. For example, a course may need to run exclusively in the morning or in the afternoon so that New Visions, VOTEC, and CTE students can access them. These courses, including music courses, are also strategically placed around each other, often in grade level streams, so that we statistically minimize conflicts between them. Our conflicts in music are both in number and in proportion lower than in other non-core courses across the system. We pay special attention to these from the inception of the schedule build. Conflicts are further reduced by our counselors and teachers who have offered creative solutions such as half-block options, independent studies, and we even moved jazz outside of the school day. And looking at the data from the 1920 school year through this year, and excluding the jazz band numbers, on average, less than 10% of the students that sign up are not able to take their music class. It is important to note that at times when faced with a conflict, students will choose to take an advanced course as opposed to taking music. Sometimes there is a choice involved and students choose the other option. This individual variability is student-specific and adds a degree of systemic variability to each year. So these numbers change from year to year based on the students, what they're selecting, and what we offer. I know other schools were mentioned as doing a better job with giving students more access to music courses. I was able to speak to the high school principals at 3 schools. None of them follow a scheduling procedure, which is different from ours with regard to music, and in the end, they all still have conflicts. The big difference for each of them is their size, both in terms of staff and students. Schools that are larger AP have a greater number of sections, which creates more chances for students to participate in music courses, i.e. they have less singletons. Less singletons means it's offered more times throughout the day, which means there's more of an opportunity for a student to get those courses. It was suggested at the board meeting that some of these schools prioritize music and scheduling as well. The principals he spoke to indicated that is not the case. They, again, are following the same procedures as we do. Additionally, the reduction of students in our instrumental program is not a simple result of conflicts. Student interest in instrumental music has decreased year by year, with fewer students signing up for the courses. Previous to COVID, we had well over 50 students signing up each year for band. For example, as of last year, that number went down to 30. So we're seeing less kids actually signing up. Simply, the size of these ensembles will go up when more students sign up for them. All right, there's obviously a correlation there. As we move into this year, I will continue to keep a very close eye on all of this, and we'll make sure that we produce a fully maximized statistical schedule. Given our size, staffing, and fiscal restraints, the key to larger ensembles will be recruitment and retention from middle school. Logistically, that is how we will achieve growth. We know that Mr. Blaustein is working hard to present at Algonquin with the goal of retaining more music students. We are very appreciative and thankful for his effort and commitment to the music program and our students. On the vocal side, Ms. Eliashuk is doing an outstanding job and has tremendous energy and positivity. As a result, I fully expect to see these numbers increasing regardless of the remaining handful of conflicts. I know this is a legitimate concern for the students who are able to participate in the courses they desire. I do my best each year to find solutions. The experience of these students has been and will continue to be a priority of mine. So again, I apologize for the lengthy response, but we felt that it was justified given the concern, rightful concern from the students and the families. Wanted to give Heath a chance to verbalize what the process is on his end and some of the intricacies and complexities of that process. Moving on from the news and updates to our celebration of success. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, we are at our first public comment period for the evening. That is for items on the agenda. I'm just going to read the guidelines, again, in case you don't forget. The public comment, again, for this section is limited to topics on the agenda. Those wishing to address the board are asked to complete the request form. I have two for on agenda items. Handed to the board clerk, that's Linda, in order to be recognized. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We invite you to keep your comments brief and direct. And questions are not generally answered in the moment, but follow up. We're gonna follow up at a later. Okay, Piper Gurney. No pressure. You're gonna do just that.
Good evening, members of the school board and members of the Averill Park community. My name is Piper Gurney and I'm a 5th grader at Miller Hill Sand Lake Elementary. Tonight I want to talk to you about the exciting and important opportunity you have for the girls of our community. I have been on various sports teams since I was 5 years old. Sports ranging from cheerleading, soccer, baseball, basketball, and the reason I'm here tonight, flag football. I started my flag football journey in 2023 as a player on the first ever girls flag football team for the Rensselaer Pop Warner. From there, I was recruited on the Under Armour's Under the Lights Flag Football League and was a first-round draft pick for the Ohio State Buckeyes. That led to earning a spot on one of the area's top travel football teams, 518 Crush. I've earned championship rings in multiple rec flag leagues, and one of those rings was earned by our all-girls team beating all of the boys teams for the title of champions. After only 2 short years, there is no doubt that flag football is changing my life and will have a big impact on my future. The mission statement of Averill Park School District is to meet the needs of and create opportunities for every student every day. Right now, we are on the brink of something truly huge that will undoubtedly give so many girls an opportunity for their future. As of July 2024, 22 colleges are offering women's flag football programs and scholarships, and many more are in the process of adding the sport. Beyond that, women's flag football will be an Olympic sport in the summer of 2028 in Los Angeles. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is considering launching men's and women's flag football professional leagues, and the NFL Pro Bowl made the switch to flag football in 2020. And if you happened to catch the Super Bowl a few weeks ago, there was a lengthy advertisement showing how the girls can dominate in the flag football world. There's no doubt that this is an opportunity that doesn't come around every day, and a timely part of this moment is now. I'm humbly asking you to vote yes for the opportunity for our girls to be able to play flag football as a high school sport. I want every girl to have the opportunity to experience the joy and confidence I have experienced being a flag football player. I appreciate your attention and consideration on this life-changing matter.
Very well done. Thank you so much. If you do want to hand, or if we can get a copy of her comments. Great. Jim, did you want to say anything? We were reaching for you. Okay. Another comment. You have that saved somewhere. Adam, I don't know how to pronounce
Think about music and just take out the ick.
Muse.
There you go.
Like a muse.
Thanks.
Yeah, please.
Okay. You can, yeah.
Piper, I don't know how I'm gonna top that. And Piper actually took some of my thunder because some of the things I'm gonna say also was in Piper's speech. Good evening, board education members. My name is Adam Muse. I'm a resident of Averill Park since 2016. I have a son in Algonquin and a daughter in West End Lake who's also here tonight. I'm speaking to you to encourage you to bring girls flag football to Averill Park's interscholastic athletics. The rise in popularity nationwide has been swift. According to the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, I don't know how to make that faster than that, but nice FISA. There's been a 63% increased participation between 2019 and 2022, with over 15,000 girls playing varsity flag football for their high schools in the years of 21 and 22. Last spring, 185 programs within the NICE FISA membership participated in a full season, making them eligible to compete for the championship. Of the 15 schools competing in Section 2, only Guilderland and Averill Park do not currently have a girls flag football team. I get a little emotional because I'm a head coach for a lot of teams, so I apologize. I'm the head coach of the Averill Park Junior Warriors 10U girls flag football team. A couple of my girls are back there. My team had 15 girls this year. We had a total of 42 in our Averill Park Junior Warriors program. We are currently a feeder system for the Averill Park Modified JV and Varsity Tackle programs. We'll also be a feeder system for the girls flag football program if you offer it. Our participation rose 300% from last season. We were able to support 3 full teams with a 16U, 13U, and 10U team. Our girls learned respect, teamwork, and team building skills throughout the season. We have seen firsthand the self-confidence and enthusiasm for this sport with all our girls. It was, if there was a concern for participation, this season you would have had enough girls to support the varsity team with our 16U girls alone. And they would have been able to compete against other Section 2 schools. What happened was the only other team that had a 16U team obviously was Guilderland because they didn't have a high school team. So our 16U team had to play the same team 8 times this season. I'm hoping Guilderland follows suit and also tries to get Averill Park to just put flag football, girls flag football on the program. Currently there are 24 colleges, so Piper had 22. I think there's 2 more since she saw that stat, that offer girls flag football scholarships, and that number continues to climb every year. As Piper also said, flag football will be the Olympic sport starting in LA in 2028. Now is the time to offer girls flag in our school district. Let's give our girls another avenue to compete and represent our school. Please vote yes and allow these girls an opportunity to show you what they're capable of. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. The only other blue sheet I have is for an item not on the agenda, so we will hear from them in a little bit. Right now, we will have our budget presentation here.
Okay, so
So we'll continue tonight with our budget presentations. Tonight I'm going to focus a little bit, start introducing some of the numbers for this year's budget. Like we did last time, we're starting with our guiding principles. It's just, I like to keep this in front of people so people understand the things that are on the back of our minds as we're going through our budget development process. So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about state aid, the tax cap, reserves and fund balance, and as well as a couple of budget pressures for this season. So we're going to start with state aid. For those of you last year may remember, the governor in her 24-25 budget proposal set aside money for foundation aid formula study. The Rockefeller Group is the one who was commissioned to do the study, and they gave their findings to the governor in December. Their findings were not a full-fledged overhaul of the foundation aid formula. Rather, they picked out certain indicators within the formula that could be updated. So some of those were the pupil needs factors, and I'll talk about how those factors are impacting our district for going into next year. Overall, her increase in foundation aid is $1.46 billion. So it was a healthy increase this year in foundation aid. So when we look at the pupil needs factors, there were two main ones that she changed based on the study that are impacting us. The first are free and reduced lunch counts going to economically disadvantaged counts. The difference between these counts are free and reduced lunch was based on K-6, economically disadvantaged is K-12, so that's including more of the student population. In addition, the economically disadvantaged counts also includes more indicators. So free and reduced lunch is just that, free and reduced lunch K-6. Economically disadvantaged takes into things like maybe social security income or being on a heating housing program, foster care, which is also a free and reduced, but it's a greater population. So that's the one that she changed. The other one is going from the 2000 census poverty data to small area income and poverty estimates, or the difference, big difference with this one is the census poverty only looked at our public school students, whereas SAPE looks at all students within our district, those attend public and or private schools. So again, expanding the number of people who are eligible for these indicators. So we go down to the chart at the bottom, and you can see the current law is before the governor changed some of these indexes and the formula. And the governor's proposal is with the updated. And you can see for free and reduced going to economic disadvantage, our count increased by 44. And going from census to SAPE, our count increases by 40 for a total of 84. So what this is saying is that our 84 more pupils are counting towards our high need index, meaning that our district is looking more needy in terms of wealth measures. So what that does when it trickles down to the pupil needs increase, you can see it's only a small change of 0.032 between current law and governor's law, but it is making a significant impact within the formula for us. And I'll show you how. So the pupil needs index factors into this foundation aid formula. There's other things, wealth measures, CPI, we all know the formula takes into a lot of different factors. But essentially what is happening is our foundation aid per pupil is increasing. So under the current law, we're about $5,600 per pupil for foundation aid. Under the governor's proposal, that jumps about to $5,900, increase of $250 per student. So the pupil count that's used in the formula for us in 25-26 is 3,229 students, which is, and that makes up the difference between the current law of the 18 million to the 19 million. So that 821,000 is based on that increase in the foundation aid per pupil that we're getting based on these changes in these index. So the updated, last year it was like, well, we don't know. They start updating things. Is it going to help us? Is it going to hurt us? These factors that she chose to update ended up helping us going into next year. So budget to budget, in the current year, we're on hold harmless, which means we got zero increase in foundation aid for the current year. Next year, we're on formula, and it turns into a $1.1 million increase over the current year. So that's the government proposal, she said $19 million, so 1.1 or 6.25% increase for us. So it ended up being a healthy increase in foundation aid for us. We go into the tax cap, which is our largest source of revenue. We start with the tax-based growth factor, 1.0091. This is not a significant number, and really the tax-based growth factor is in the formula to try to account for districts where they may be having a lot of development in their school districts, so a lot of single-family neighborhoods that may be coming in. So this gives you a factor where you can increase your tax cap to try to address some of that incoming population. Ours is very small. And the allowable growth factor next year is 2%, which is at the cap. It is below inflation again for next year, because CPI ended at 2.95 for the year. So we're at the max, but still below CPI. The largest portion of our tax levy is our capital exclusion. And right now we have the $28.5 million project going on. We're in the middle of that. We have work ongoing right now through this summer and even into next summer. So we're not done with that capital project yet. We're getting towards the tail end of it though. So we're looking at bond versus ban in terms of the capital project for next year. Bond turns the project into permanent financing, so that's done over 15 years and you get a principal and interest payment every year. A ban is 1 year financing, and we started the project with bans, where we have one this right now, and you increase that ban each year as you spend more and more through the capital project. So the bond expense, if we do a bond next year, is about $1 million more than the cost of the ban would be for another year. And the issue that we're having is because our projects are still ongoing, in 25, 26, we won't have all the project aid back to offset that additional cost. So it would drive up the cost of the project on the local share. So to avoid that happening, we're gonna ban again for 25, 26, and look to do permanent financing in 26, 27. What this is gonna do to the capital exclusion is gonna decrease it year over year from the current year by $166,000. That will eventually increase the 26, 27 capital exclusion in the following year because that big bond payment will be coming on, but again, we'll have more money to offset it. So what this shakes out to do, and the tax levy limit is 2.41% by going with a ban for a total of $37 million. And the increase there is $871,000 over the current year. The strategic use of fund balance reserve, this was a big topic for us last year when I did this presentation, because last year was the first year that we significantly increased our reliance on fund balance and reserves to support the budget. So in 25, 26, we're proposing to have the same level of fund balance reserves as we did in the current year, which is $2.6 million. The breakout down below, the 1.6 appropriated fund balance, is the same as well as the distribution amongst the reserves. So this is the current breakdown that we have in the 24-25 budget. We're proposing to keep that same level of reliance in the 25-26 budget. So what our largest budget pressure going to next year is our health insurance cost. We talked a little bit last year about starting the budget in a deficit projection, and it's like, well, how, is that possible when we're getting all this additional foundation aid? And really, we're going to go through this slide, and you can hop down to the second bullet, and you can see budget increase 1.3 million for health insurance, which pretty much eats away our entire foundation aid increase. So that's why we're still struggling with this deficit balance, even though we have gotten better foundation aid numbers. So health insurance, we have two carriers, CDP, HP, and Highmark, and you can see their rate increases for next year, almost 11%, 9.5%. Prescription came in a lot better this year at 3%, or a couple of years ago we were at 20%. So, but our health insurance rates, they're pretty common, those increases for this area. Our spend right now for health insurance is about $11 million for the district. So you take that by 10%, there's your $1 million. So you can see how that increases there. I broke down the district cost per plan just to give an idea of how much the district pays per individual and family plans. We also have a 2-person plan in the middle, but so for every individual plan we have, it's $12,000, and for a family, it's $31,000. That's how much we pay. Yeah, do you have a question?
Did you say that we offer more plans than just those two?
No, those are our two plans that we offer. We only have those two carriers, CDP, HP, Highmark. We do have,
as far as the individual and family, or do we offer like individual plus one?
yeah, we do 2-person.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's multiple.
yeah, it's pretty
options
close to
for that.
family, so that's why I just kind of picked out individual and family, but we do have a 2-person plan too.
I know in corporate world that's significant if we only have the two. That's why I wanted clarity.
Yeah, we do. So the reason I did this also is, this year we do have a fair number of retirements. I think they're up to 12 or 13 for this year. So when you're looking at the health insurance budget, and if people retire from the district, if they're on our plan, they take that health insurance coverage into retirement. So then when we backfill those positions and bring new employees on, we have to budget for additional plan to cover the new employees that take those positions. So it's a combination of two things. One, it's the increase in the rates, but then there's also making sure we're covered to backfill any of the retirees. So that's what, so every time I budget a new retirees replacement, I'm budgeting a new health insurance plan for them as well. Dr. Franchini mentioned this before, we are part of CASHIC, a Capital Area School Health Insurance Consortium. There's 21 local school districts that participate in that, and between all of us, we have over 20,000 covered lives. It really works the same way as a purchasing consortium, what we do for goods and services. We pool all of our plans together to try to bring down some of those administrative costs. It's how we try to achieve some efficiencies in terms of cost control. We also do things, we're constantly looking at the plans. I think every other month I go to a CASHIC meeting, we're looking at trends. Dr. Franchini mentioned earlier, one of the things that we're looking at was trying to put in some controls in place for GLP-1s and some of our specialty drugs, not to make it harder for people to get them, but to get them source them from places that's more affordable through the plans. Another budget pressure, although much smaller, the employee retirement system, the rate there is increasing a little bit over 1%. So right now the current budget impact is about $162,000. The rate's increasing as well as salaries go up every year. So between the two of them, it's $162,000. Where are we now? So noted last time that we started a $1.6 million deficit. As we move forward and present the budget to you next time, our recommendations are going out to the maximum with the tax cap, as well as maintaining the same use of reserves and accounts. Any questions? Yeah.
I think I remember from watching the video from last time that 6.25% is potentially the minimum that we're gonna get. So if we get more, will we use less of our reserves, or will we cut less, if you know the answer to this yet?
I don't know the answer to that yet,
Okay.
but yeah, so
And this eats, that, like, so this will eat into our reserves, much like it did last year? Can you hear me?
yeah, so
Well, but it won't be on the recording.
yeah, so it can eat into our reserves. Again, if we spend out, when we presented this last year, we said, we're applying this much towards the budget, and we tap into it. If our expenditures go above our revenues, then we start drawing from these different funds. So can it? It can, but this year we're not gonna tap into them. And you can see that on the fund balance for projection that's in there on the board agenda for this evening, but so we're good for this year. So it's not like we're dipping in, and dipping in again.
Right. I saw that we weren't dipping in, but so that was if we needed to, we were gonna dip in last year.
If we need to balance it, well, yeah, because it's part of the budget, so because our revenues don't match our
Right.
expenses. So it's
Right.
part of the budget, but our revenues are exceeding our significantly what our projection was, primarily because of interest.
Don't say that too loudly.
I know.
I think the important thing there too, that we keep in mind, that our budget adoption is in April.
Right.
We don't know when the state is going to approve their budget.
Right.
So that's always a factor, these timelines do not match. So I think the simple answer to your question is if we were to get more state aid, in general, the recommendation would be don't spend as much as our reserves. Because while we're not increasing the amount of the use of our fund balance reserves, remember from last year, we are using more than we would like to, right? And we're dipping into that cycle of deficit budget. So if we're at 6.25 right now, I think it'd be unreasonable if we're gonna get much more, right? So let's say we got a little bit more, that would really most likely only go to reducing our dependence on training our savings. If that makes sense. Depending on how this all shakes up timing wise and what we do with the recommended budget. But there's a few factors there that I think if we were, I just don't want you to leave thinking, hey, if the governor comes through, if the legislature comes through with a increase, that's gonna solve all problems. I don't think it's gonna happen, first of all, and second of all, remember, we're at an over-reliance on fund balance and reserves as it is.
Right. How many more years could we go at the rate we're at right now of pulling from reserves before there are no reserves left?
Doing off of memory from last year's presentation, I think it was at least 5 we had, something like that, yeah.
We had that, you did that.
There was a chart in last year's.
And again, there's a lot of scenarios with that, right? Because you're not budgeting to 100%. So in theory, there should be some gap there, and that's helping replenish those reserves, but you can't count on that.
Right, also, I guess, because it seems like it's not as bad as we thought it was gonna be, so then I was just trying to understand if that bought us more years.
Yeah, well, it was at least by 1 on the tail end.
Right, okay, thank you.
Go to Jess.
Well, I just still like at 6.25% from the state on foundation aid to offer everything we have this year. Next year, we still need to get cut $1.6 million from our budget, and that's a huge number, again. So it's just, I mean, even at 6.25%, it's just, when you look at, things like the ERS and TRS and then the health insurance, those costs are killing us right now, so, yeah. I'm very pleased that we got 6.25. I'm not saying that, but 6.25 over a little bit from last year would have been nice too. So we're missing out on that. Every time we get 0, we lose, so.
No, that's fine, that's, you took the words out of my mouth. There's no indication either that, I appreciate actually, we were wondering when that 6.2 number came in, there wasn't a ton of clarity at the outset of why that was, so I appreciate, and now I will say, that, from, Adam, you went to the town halls that Rockefeller held, and that was something that came up over and over again, of asking for the numbers to reflect kind of more nuance. So I actually kind of appreciate, I'm a little bit surprised, and grateful. But have they given any indication that like, this is 25, 26? Are they gonna maintain that forward from 26, 27? Are they gonna add other, there was a myriad of recommendations that came out of Rockefeller. These were a couple of them. So we don't know if they're gonna say, well, we tried that and it wasn't that significant, so we're just gonna go back to what it was. Anyway, we don't have a sense of any sort of long-term commitments.
Not yet, not until the budget, if they change the law, like through the budget process, then we would have an indication, but until there's like a true action on it, we don't have an indication.
So we're really just like one day at a time kind of situation. Okay.
If I,
Go ahead, Mary.
I think that the responsibility falls to us as community members to stay in front of them and not allow them to be distracted by other shiny objects, and make sure that the importance of education funding stays at the top of the list. So unfortunately, it's a long road, but we have to continue to keep knocking on their doors and continue to keep raising awareness to it, and tell them that while you're only cutting us off at the knees, it's still not good enough.
Send us up the next. Jessica.
I have another, Jesse, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. So we're saying, even with getting the 6.25% to maintain what we're doing, or we still have to cut 1.6 million more from this year's budget than we did from last year's budget?
From next year's budget. Yeah, maintain what we have this year.
No, not maintain.
No, we're not gonna maintain what we have this
We have
year,
to
'cause
cut
we have to
1.6
cut
million
$1.6
to pull the same amount from the reserves.
Right.
Correct.
We have to cut 1.6 million more in programming.
So our overall year-over-year shortfalls, like 3.2 million, 1.6 of that we're funding with reserves, the other 1.6 we're funding through cuts.
If you look at it that way, yeah, we do our deficit budgeting, so yes, we're 2.6 in the negative to start.
Well, and just for like, I've had a lot of, I don't know, commentary about how the state funding works for schools that has been not positive. We'll just say that. But I will say that technically, we have had decreases in enrollment. That's not an untrue statement. But at the same time, we've had these increases in special needs, IEPs, stuff like that. And so hopefully that nuance makes it into this conversation as well. The narrative of paying for empty seats is not valid, even though we have seen a decrease in enrollment, right? So, cutting isn't, it's not don't know if I want to say crazy, but it's mathematically, I don't know, I feel like you guys have done a really amazing job in terms of what we can, where we can make up the difference in the least harmful ways. So I'd like to see the state come on. My biggest concern is that now that there's not the Rockefeller Institute hype, that this might sort of drain off the attention meter, so maybe we can keep the pressure on. March 4th.
Yeah.
I think an important part, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, if you go to the slide for the board tonight, right, given that this presentation is focused on the financial numbers, in my opinion, and Carrie and I spent a lot of time talking about this, I think the most important thing for you to fully understand is the tax cap and the impacts of the capital projects on the tax cap. Keeping in mind that we have, I believe, rightfully added these projects to, right, 2021 and 2024 project, because we had deferred maintenance that wasn't being done, that we have now are starting to catch up on. But remembering that comes at a cost, because we were not in a situation where we had debt coming off, so you had debt coming on. So that comes at a cost, and that cost is impacted or affected or comes through in that tax cap projection. I think the kind of common knowledge that the tax cap is a really like simple formula, right? You put this number in, and it just magically gives you that number. It's like that to some degree. Some of those numbers that Carrie had up there are out of our control and are factual. There's other stuff that gets involved when you get into the capital project, which gets extremely complex in terms of when these projects are being completed, when you can then file the paperwork with SED, when the funding comes back, when the borrowing changes from short-term to long-term, the impact of that borrowing on the revenue and on the expenses. That's really, if you're boiling down this presentation, in my opinion, the part to focus on tonight. That's where the work is really going, that Carrie's done in consultation with Tony Arnold, because as our project manager, he's really working closely with Carrie on what will be done, when will it be done. That number, if you go back to that tax cap
Can you go back?
slide, there's some fluctuation there. And I think the key slide, go to the next one, Carrie, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That bond versus ban is really probably the biggest, from a financial point of view, the biggest topic you and I have been talking through is, do we ban or do we bond? We've talked to Tony about this, we've talked to Mosaic about this. Where are we with that? That was the real dilemma, a harder decision to make. And what we're very clear on now, from our point of view, is recommending to you that plan right there, which is to ban, which is the short-term borrowing, for one more year for 25, 26, to not bond until 26, 27. There's a cost to doing that both ways. And what Carrie has done very well, honestly, is not only look at this year's tax cap, but next year. And for those who've been around for a while, that is something she's tried to do, I think, is say to you, hey, here's what's look like this year, but here's next year, obviously projected, because we don't know, there's a lot of variables. Here's this year, here's next year, here's the year after. And if we go with the bonding or the banning, or if things change here, it's gonna impact here and here. If things change here, it's gonna impact. So that's the number, right, that we are really focused, I think, tonight on. Because as we get to the next presentation, which is the superintendent's recommended budget to you, we need to know what the tax cap is going to be. Our recommendation is ban for one more year, bond after that. That gives you the numbers, whichever slide that was, very. Or it just shuts down the entire presentation. Perhaps
Like a metaphor.
where we're at.
Sorry, why would you, are we gonna have the $1 million increase for next year, 26, 27, if it's on then? Does it just roll over?
Can I ask a question related to that? Am I understanding the ban like a bridge loan? Is that like, would that be the equivalent of?
I'm gonna wait for, because
Okay.
hopefully Matt and Brady can handle
I feel
that.
like
you
I'm
focus on
listening.
that,
Yeah, 'cause this is really, this is, Carrie's the expert on this, so I don't wanna say anything incorrectly. Michelle, what was your, I don't wanna ignore that question first.
Are we still going to incur the 1 million if we bond the following year?
Are we just basically pushing that envelope out?
Yeah, yes, we're still gonna have that expense 1 year out, yeah. Because we're gonna bond next year.
We're just buying time.
The reason we're buying time is to get the rest of the aid for the project. Because what you try to do is keep your local share as small as possible, because that impacts the tax cap.
So then why was it such a big controversy, I guess, or big decision?
Well, because we have enough finished after this summer, we'd have enough finished of our project where we could bond. You have to get to a level of spend where you could bond. Why it's not a controversy, we were just going back and forth looking at the numbers in terms of, do we have a higher tax cap, and quite frankly, probably a tax cap that we wouldn't feel comfortable going at it, so we'd have to go lower than the cap, which then takes away from money for programming. So that was kind of the internal.
I would think your band interest expense is higher than your bond interest.
No, it's smaller.
Band is smaller, lower interest.
The amount is
The
significant.
amount.
Yes,
but
the
not
amount.
the rate.
The projection was on 3.75%, so not an awful rate.
So then why would we bond? Why wouldn't we continue that and say?
But you can only do, I think you can only ban for 5 years, and plus, once you have your project spent out, you go to permanent financing. You can't just continually ban, at some point you have to finance it so you can pay it off.
So we could potentially do it again next year if we had to. We're not at the 5-year mark yet, correct?
We could, at that point, our project would be likely so almost all spent, so I think I work with our fiscal advisors on this, and they would tell me you should go to bond now, because you have most of your aid flowing in as well as most of your project spend. Because then you're taking on another interest payment as well.
And so
Even
just,
though our interest would be higher? They would just assume that?
It's higher because it's for when you're doing it for 1 year, your interest is a lot lower, because you're just financing, you're just buying money for a year, essentially. When you go to a mortgage, you're essentially going for a mortgage on the payment, so 15 years. So your principal and interest payments are higher, your interest payment, because it's on the whole amount of money, whereas this, you're just buying cash for a year, you're not buying cash for 15 years.
no, that works, that answered my question. Okay. Anybody else?
So that tax cap number, this is where the entire system shut down. So if you can try it again without shutting down the system. There we go. And so what we're looking at is recommending going out at 241, which is low, right? And it would be higher if we went to bond right now, which is what Carrie was kind of saying. If we did the bond now, we'd probably be recommending to you to go under the tax levy. The 241 is lower than we were projecting as recently as a few days ago. Right, so as these numbers are continuing to get fine-tuned by Carrie and Tony, that's the 241 is where we would be in terms of the tax cap, and what would we be recommending to you to go out at.
But you said you wanted to max out, right?
Max out the tax cap,
Right.
and that is the max for us, the 241.
Oh, it is.
Given the calculation based on banning and not bonding, it would be a 241 tax.
So that changes every year.
Yeah.
I didn't
Last year we were
realize
at
that.
3.9.
Last year was like 3.9.
3.98.
I thought it was the same every year.
And our plan was to kind of continue along that, but as we kind of fine tune these numbers, it was gonna be north of that. It's gonna be probably the 5.5 range, 4.5
So
range.
what changes that number?
The bond and the ban,
Okay.
But then
And when the aid is coming back too,
right?
right?
So does the aid come back in a timeline that makes it so we can maintain, like, we don't have to go up to 4 for the tax levy as well? Like, it's basically these sources that allow us to not go higher on the tax levy.
Right, the only caveat I'm gonna give to that is next year, you may have to start banning for 39 million. So there's all that rolling factor in there too. I wanna go back to some things I did misspoke. The interest is about the same, the principal is a lot different. The principal payment on the band is significantly less than the principal interest on the bond. It wasn't the interest, it was the principal, so I just wanted to correct myself on that. So it should, like, if your aid matches up to your payments, it keeps that local share control. However, we might have like a band, like interest payment coming on for the following year if we're gonna start our project in 2026. We have capital reserve that we're gonna use next year in 2026, but I'm sure likely more than the $2 million, so.
I feel like I might send you an email with some more questions.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm marinating. I have questions.
What's that? Go ahead.
I'll bring lunch for our meeting.
There's a lot to it, there's no doubt.
So I usually have to miss this board meeting every year because I'm traveling somewhere. Do you come back 2 weeks from now and give us your recommendations with cuts and things like that?
So yeah, the next meeting will be the recommended budget. Just double checking my dates here to make sure I'm correct. So the next meeting is the recommended budget, and then we built in 2 years ago, one meeting with no presentations for pure discussion. And then the meeting after that is the date that you have to adopt one. So the order is kind of chosen purposely in terms of what we do. We put this one as late as possible before the recommendation to get as much information and detail as possible. But it continually changes, right? Including the legislature and the governor getting together and having a budget and what we're reading and hearing from that in terms of will that 6.25 go up. Last year, we were in a much different situation with the whole harmless and the negative, the zero and all that stuff. This year, I think it's much more stable. I think we're probably gonna be at that number most likely. So, yeah, the short answer to your question is, yeah, the full meeting, and my recommendation is gonna kind of sum up some of the non-instructional, some of the instructional, some of this, and then have the actual, what we're planning for next year in terms of cuts and reductions, where it's going to be.
Any more questions for now? Thanks, Carrie. All right, we can move along to approval of the minutes at the February 10, 2025 meeting. I just need a motion, Megan first, Lauren second. Any discussion on February 10 meeting minutes? Okay, hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the that is, any against, any abstentions? Jess abstains, everybody else is a yes. That passes, thank you guys. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for business, personnel, and special education. That's items 6, 7, and 8. Megan first, Adam second. Any discussion on the consent agenda, Adam?
Yeah. So let me bring this up for a second, just so I can be looking at it. Item 6H, the fund balance projection report. In the fund balance projection report, it looks like we're projecting a total unassigned balance of 5.1 million for the end of the year. And we plan to use 1.6 of that to help offset the shortfall in the draft budget that you just presented. This is going to leave 3.5 million left in the unassigned balance, which is 858,000 over our 4% limit, which I'm putting in air quotes for now. First, I want to verify, my understanding of where the overall balance has come from. I believe it's just from us trying to save money, and from places where we were conservative when making the budget last year, where actual costs were less than budgeted. Is that right?
There's some of that, like I alluded to before, interest right now is we are well above our revenue budget for interest, primarily due to two things. We joined NICLAS and NILES. Our interest rates this year are north of 4%, which is great. So we're well above budget on that. We've made a conscious effort, like during the tax budget, to get the money, stick it in there to get the interest. So we're above budget for that. We've also gotten a few other smaller revenues, like a FEMA recovery for $129,000. That's not budgeted revenue because we didn't know when if it was ever coming. So it's on the revenue side as well as there are some places in the budget that we are under budget. But it's coming from, I think, primarily from the revenue side. I just want to clarify though, the 5.1 million, just so everybody has to think, that's not from this year's budget alone. That's from last year's unassigned fund balance rolled forward. So I don't want people to think we're $5 million under budget or, because that sounds like a good number. So that's not the case. But yeah.
Do you have the number for this year off the top of your head?
That we're under?
Yeah.
I have the projected expenses. But it's really, when I look at it, I look at the amount under compared to the revenue that we've gained.
Yeah.
So that's
Just like
where you're
overall
coming
delta
to
for
this,
the
yeah.
year.
We were about 66 and we're at 64. to about 2, but again, we had $2.6 million gap in revenue, so,
Okay.
yeah.
All
And
right,
a
so
lot
my,
of guesstimates at this point.
my next question is I put the 4% limit in air quotes because I don't know what is, what are the ramifications of being over the limit? Like, do they enforce that? Do they not? Do they just, is it a recommendation? Is it a law? What is it?
Yeah, it's a law. So what would happen if we were over the 4%, we would get an audit comment, and we have to, submit to the state our plans to correct it and stay within the 4%. In reality, that 4%, what we'll do at the end of the year is put it to reserves. So we won't technically be over the 4%, because we'll allocate it. So a lot of the interest that we're getting this year is interest on money that we have in reserves. So we have to put all that interest to the designated reserves. We have the capital project, we can start funding money towards the 39 million, or not 39, the next project after that, so we already did the 39, so we could do things and stick in reserves with TRS to help fund future budgets. So that is over the 4%, but in the end of the year, we close the books, we wouldn't be at over the 4%. I give you that resolution that we do in June, say like, here's what I'd like to do with this money.
So you're projecting an extra $850K that's
Mhm.
currently unassigned that you can use for anything you want, as we're discussing 1.6 million in cuts?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking my understanding.
Yeah, no, that's additional money we would apply to something towards the budget, not to the budget, to a reserve and or fund balance for next year.
Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna ask it as a more plain layperson question. Can we apply that excess if there does end up being, because I know the budget is fluid and, numbers change as information changes that we get, but can we apply that towards the planning for a deficit to prevent having to cut as much?
We could, the only risk of continuing to grow the fund balance that you appropriate towards the budget, again, remember, you're creating a greater deficit budget as you move forward. So right now, we're 2.6 million, you add $800,000, and now you're to 3 million. You do that again another year, now you're 4 million. At some point, it can't be the stopgap. Just, that's kind of the 3 million.
I need to do math to school. I need like a math tutor. You got the extra time.
All right.
Adam, is that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a note on agenda item 7A, the retirement that we are acknowledging in this line item is for Sharon Smith. She spent 30 years with the district, so we wanted to thank her for her service and wish her well in her retirement.
Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving this consent agenda items 6, 7, and 8? That is unanimous. Thank you, guys. Okay. We're on to discussion regarding flag football. Jim, was I? First of all, thank you guys for coming. Jim, do you want to?
Shall we put it on as a discussion item for the board? You received my memo last week with my recommendation. I first want to state Mark Kubiak wanted to be here. I had to email the board. I asked him to come tonight and he had planned on coming, but unfortunately had a personal issue of significance that he's dealing with, so he's unable to attend. Laid out for you following the board policy, the different steps and what we did in terms of surveying students, getting an interest level, looking at comparable schools. It's reviewed by our Title IX person, which is Kim. This one is Title IX neutral, based on the fact that our OCR complaint that was filed years ago is in the final stages. So there's no reason to add or not to add it from a Title IX point of view. And then just came down to a recommendation based on the factors. It goes to Carrie from a budget point of view. They're obviously well versed in our budgetary issues. We're in year 3 of cutting and reducing, and really no end in sight to that. So there's a financial impact that is going to be tough. Our current survey data does not show an interest. And then the sustainability of core sports on the female side in the spring raises questions about whether or not we could be competitive in those core sports, given our size. We are by far the smallest suburban council school, so a little bit of a disadvantage if we start with that numbers. So based on all the information that's detailed in the memo, the recommendation from myself on the policy to the board is to not approve flag football for the spring. So we welcome any discussion, questions, and then on the agenda, you see 10A is opportunity to vote on it. Again, looking for the vote sooner rather than later, just because it impacts the budget.
So we can just open it up to a discussion.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I don't know if anyone here has the answer. Do we know the age limits that we currently offer for recreational? For like the feeder program that he's talking about?
Can we answer or no?
I have no problem, just a short answer.
Yeah, we have a 10U, a 13U, and a 16U.
What is your name?
10 and under, 13 and under, and 16 and under.
It's basically from 8 to 16.
Do you know the numbers of girls in each one of those programs?
We had a total of 40, we had a total of 42. My personal team at 10U was 15.
Between the 3 programs?
Yeah.
42?
Yep.
Thank you.
Do we know if all of your participants are of Averill Park District, or do any of them live out of district? I know the survey data collected doesn't necessarily correlate, so I'm trying to figure out where the discrepancy lies, I guess.
That's just.
Right, because we're talking about, well, freshmen, what, 13, 14 years old?
So we don't know, so that's probably a discrepancy.
Probably is.
With the survey data is 6th graders.
Yes. it
Starts at
doesn't-
6th grade.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, and it's technically would be.
Well,
Right.
So their program is ages 8 to 16, so you're talking about elementary age kids. And by the time survey data, you've got, I see where, okay, got it. With the budget constraints, is there some support that can be offered in order of structure that doesn't necessarily involve funding?
Oh, I think that's not up to us, I mean, that would be. I feel like this came up with something else. Anytime, yeah, so anytime there's like, I think, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's a sport or even activity that is loosely tied to the school grounds, say, like, that's not, we don't take responsibility for that kind of, right? If it's a school sport, it's a school sport, and it's under our umbrella, and if it's not, then it's really more facilities, use, yes, and then we would really be that much involved. Jessica?
I think, I just have a question, I'm trying, and maybe, I'm hoping those of you that were here last year, but why, and maybe it's because proportionally the interest was greater, why
Girls wrestling, thank you. Girls wrestling was approved, but flag football is not. And maybe that's where Title IX comes in.
So when we went through the process last year with flag football, or girls wrestling, there's a few things. One, we currently had at that moment girls wrestling. They were wrestling on the boys program. So we already had girls in the high school who were wrestling. I think the decision on the recommendation came from the fact that we believe it was unfair to put those girls in that situation. At the time, it was the fastest growing sport in New York State. We talked through those details. There was significant interest on the team already, as well as the survey that Mark did showed further interest down below. At that time as well, the coaches, the boys' coaches, were voluntarily taking those girls to meets on their own. So we already had coaches who were doing above and beyond.
Without corresponding compensation, you're saying
Right,
essentially,
right.
yeah.
And we had girls who were already actively competing, as well as girls we knew in the system who wanted to compete. We also had, at that point, the OCR violation, which predates me, so we're talking at least 8 years ago, or an exact year now. That was in the process, right, that was filed because of the Title IX complaint. That is now wrapping itself up. The movement on girls wrestling obviously helped that complaint, because we're adding a girls sport. At this point, based on the advice of our attorney, we are in good shape. So there's no Title IX reason to add a girls sport. Whereas girls wrestling, there was. We were trying to become more in compliance and show good faith effort that we were trying to. If there was interest in girls sport that we would and could add, that we would. So there's girls wrestling checked off a lot of boxes. Current interest below, and the OCR complaint of a Title IX violation, and the district's desire to close that out and do the right thing.
This is a complete new startup compared to already something. which is
Right, we don't currently have a flag football.
Well, and I think structurally too, the challenge is that the current program in the community is for ages 8 to 16. The district offers modified sports at the middle school level and then high school sports, but to my knowledge, and since I've lived here, or anywhere for that matter, I don't know of a district that offers an actual school-sanctioned sports program at the elementary level.
There are none. It's the New York State Public.
It's not a thing,
Association
right?
starts in seventh grade.
Okay.
Well, and just to be clear, this is just for the high school.
This would be a
This
varsity.
wouldn't be to.
This is a varsity program, and we don't know the number of girls that would actually be participating in that program.
According to Mark's survey, so 11th graders had 0 who were very interested and 4 who were somewhat. 3 of them are currently playing a spring sport. 10th grade had 2 that were very interested, 2 that were somewhat, 2 were already playing a spring sport. Current 9th grade, 7 interested, 8 somewhat interested, 6 currently playing spring sport.
So we risk, there's a potent effect of pulling from other sports.
When you look at the size of our school,
Yeah.
and you compare our size to the schools in general who have it, there are some exceptions. The biggest exception or most notable exception would be Port Alton Perth. The other suburban council schools are larger.
But does Broad Alton, if I say that right, correct, do they have, well, what are other spring sports?
I don't know what they are.
Soccer, yeah.
If the program, it sounds like, is becoming more popular at a younger level, we could always revisit it, maybe from a better financial standpoint, when those participants get closer to varsity. I mean, there's no saying we can't look at this again next year or 3 years from now, once they realize they should give us more money from the state, right? I mean, it's not like this bars a future evaluation, but we're saying right now, the current students at the high school, proportionally speaking, the interest is low.
Correct.
And
I want
And again,
to ask
you
about
have-
that interest being low.
Okay.
So when we schedule my business, when we schedule a marketing event, we have ratios based on experience. For this many emails, this many people reply, this many people register, and this many people actually attend, and this many people actually buy. So you surveyed 7 grades of kids, and you got 35 of them. I don't know how many girls that is, but you got 35 to say, I might be mildly interested at least. How many people do you need to field a team? Because we surveyed like 7 grades, and you'll be using 4 grades, I assume, if it's high school. Maybe you have someone in 8th grade playing up. How many people on the team?
I know right now, my daughter's a freshman and your daughter's 7th grade.
These
Maria.
three are all.
They all struggled to see this email. Us as parents had to tell them to look in their email to find it. So we don't know how big of a group actually saw it.
No, but he was asking how many.
But to field the
Field
team,
is 10 to 15, minimum 10, but usually it's between 10
You
to
need
15.
subs, otherwise you get hurt.
Plus varsity sports, as you
15,
mentioned,
right?
8th through 12th grade. So that's 5 grades potentially be playing varsity.
what if your 7th and 8th graders had the opportunity for the the APP test that, like, I know my son's a wrestler right now and his best friend just took it to be on varsity in 8th grade. If you had those girls take it, you 90% chance would have a team this season. I know my daughter's a freshman and this is her only opportunity to wear a jersey. And I'm emotional because I was a soccer player here at Eagle Park. I graduated in 2003. So I know how much pride comes along with being able to wear a jersey. She tried out for softball in 7th grade. 22 kids tried out, 21 kids made the team. She was the one who didn't. This is an opportunity she has to play spring sport, to wear the jersey for her school, to feel the pride her brothers, who both
Okay.
play football, get to feel.
Thank you.
So, sorry.
So we did our best on the survey. We, based upon the data that we have, there's a chance we can field a team. We're talking about cutting $1.6 million in academic programs. So I kind of, I'm along the same lines as Jess, where I feel like this is a really good idea, but it's not the time for us yet. So that's what I'm thinking.
Can I, I'd like to hear from our student representatives. Your point of view here, as always, is very important.
I would say the biggest thing is I also think our microphones are always on. I don't know how to turn on. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I hear what they're saying about the emails. I don't know many people who check their school emails. You know, I do, but like most people don't. Like we'll get emails about stuff, and I'm not sure how it was posted because we're not in the grade to receive those emails. So I'm not sure if there was more information, and we're also out of school half the day, so I don't know if it was on the announcements. I know we do class meetings like once a quarter. I don't know if that was talked about at all, because I would say that there's a decent amount of like just interest among my friends. I know they talked about it a couple years ago, and some of my friends were like, I would definitely join flag football, and you know, sports that I know we have some sports where it's super competitive to even get on the teams. I'm like speaking from personal experience. I think if we could offer a sport where it's a little bit easier, not easier to make the team, but easier to just feel like you're a part of something, you know, and like less stressful. Like it just seems like it could be a good environment for kids. I would just be curious to know how many kids are aware of that email is being sent and the survey was out there.
What's a better way to communicate with the students?
They need like a direct, like if someone needs to tell them it's there. Like kids don't check their emails, which is hard. But like I know we have class meetings and like you're required to go. It's during the school day. I think, you know, I'm not sure if that was brought up at all. I don't know if anyone here is really aware of like what was on those slides. Because I'm not there. I don't have advisory where they hold those meetings. But I think if it was talked about there and kids were actually, if someone told them about it, I think there probably would have been a higher interest in the surveys.
What about morning announcements?
Well, the announcements they do right before advisory. Is that still true this year? Are they still before advisory? Yeah. I honestly think that people don't soak up the information most that they should. There's just a lot of talking. It's kind of hard to hear on the PA systems. I'm not sure that unfortunately much kids can read through those.
Jim, did I hear you say that there were reminders on the morning announcements?
Emailing out, the subject was important, flag football survey, reminder, emailing out. After that, so at least twice, messages were on the morning announcements at the middle school and at the high school. And Mark used the athletic department X account for asking females in grade 6, 11 to check their email. So we use social media, morning announcements, and email.
Yeah, I do recall getting an email from the district, and I saw the efforts of parents on social media, like prompting other parents, like, please remember to like have your kids make sure that they're checking this. So I think there was a lot of like grassroots parent effort as well to do that. So, well, we always want to look at like, are we collecting good data? Are we doing the outreach that we can? At a certain measure, we also have to accept that like, we can only work with the information that we got. I personally, and I know that this is brought up before, like in assessment of this, there was a comment of like, nobody has directly gone to Mark to talk to him about that.
That's okay. Also true. No one has gone, no one went to Mark.
Which I personally don't love that as a data point, because I just don't think that students feel like that's intimidating to do, and I don't know that students know that that would be a requirement for us to understand their interest. I will say just in reading about and understanding how we come to those conclusions, as you said, some of the like legal response that we're trying to account for is before your time. Also before my time as a board member, obviously, this is only my first year. So I personally didn't feel comfortable that I had the context there for like how that does and does not impact our decisions. I also personally had a hard time understanding this, the numbers you shared, the beds number. I did not understand what that meant. What I was gathering from that had to do with like the pool of potential students who could be interested in the sport. Was I understanding that correctly?
There's a description in there. It says, enrollment grade 9 plus enrollment grade 10 plus the average of 9 and 10 as of June 2023. It's a formula used by the state to determine classifications. So when you look at schools that are class AA, AAA, single A, class B, that's what they use as a formula.
So for context for like the public, so when we're looking at, as you've heard us say, we have like some really hard decisions to make in terms of trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. And so we look at some numbers to compare how are other districts doing that, what is the pool, how do we compare for that? So that's what we're talking about here. For transparency. And I do think to somebody else's point about how we already had some girls doing wrestling that were like they planted the seeds, they were the forerunners. I do think that if we had more students, particularly girls who were seeing flag football games, I think that we will have a growing interest. But much like other board members have established, I think with wrestling, there were some girls at the forefront that their peers were able to see, oh, they're doing it, talking to their friends. It looks like that is growing in our community and that's super exciting. But like you all shared, I think the momentum building to eventually build that looks like it's hopefully there. And like others said, maybe we'd be looking at different financial data, including maybe contributions from other sources who are committed to having girls flag football. For myself too, just as a board member, I just wanted to say that in looking at this, I just had more questions and wanting to know as a board member personally what our numbers look like in terms of girls and boys sports and how that breaks down, and I don't know that information, so.
I have a question for you. What, I guess, like, is there a potential to join with other schools to lower the cost like we do with some of the other sports, hockey, swimming, things like that? Or is that completely off the table?
A couple things. If I can go back to the board's one business. I just want to caution the board that I keep hearing comments about other ways to fund. I don't know what those are. We have a budget and they have to come from there. There was some grant startup money by the New York Giants, the NFL.
That's what I was.
To the best of our knowledge, that money does not exist anymore.
Right.
Mark did research on that and the schools that are looking to have it, and it's our belief, not 100% confirmed, but after his conversations that money is not there anymore. It was, what we understand to be was seed startup money. The other option for athletics is a self-pay-to-play model, which has been used here in the past. Lacrosse was brought in that way during your time. I would strongly urge you not to consider that. It doesn't work because it happens for a year or two, where parents who are interested in starting it, they pay for it, and then eventually it goes away. It becomes a belief that it should be in the budget, and the district has to take it on. So I would not recommend having any, in my opinion, any serious consideration to a self-funded program in anything, whether it's arts, music, sports. If the budget can't support it, then we probably should not, in my opinion.
I would agree with that, just even from an accessibility standpoint. I don't want us to have sports that are only available to the wealthiest among us. I don't think.
Well, it wouldn't be an individual paying, it'd be through the booster fund.
Yeah.
So there'd be fundraising and all that. So
Yeah.
I don't think, we would never exclude someone because of that, but it just brings, I think, a larger systemic issue that we probably want to be a little weary of. I wrote down, you're looking, and I know Mark did this, I believe, last year for this, because he did a report on the OCR complaint, on a breakdown of male-female sports. I can get you those numbers.
I would
That's
appreciate
what
it,
you were-
yeah.
The number of sports and the number of athletes.
I think he had it in his presentation there back in November when we had
It's
presented.
Yeah.
He had
Yeah.
those, was that,
Yeah.
okay.
That's right, it is, you're right.
It's in there.
It's in board docs. I was thinking something back to OCR, but you're right. That
Yeah,
was-
no, it was a
I'll look back at that, because I think we didn't have an opportunity to talk about anything at
Yeah.
length during that presentation.
And then to answer Michelle's question, the thing with a sports merger is the school that you're merging with has to want to do the merger too.
Yeah.
So if it's not a mutual thing, it can't happen. So I don't know of any school that is looking to merge. If you think about our mergers, hockey, for example, it's, I don't remember anymore, it's 5 or 6 districts,
Yeah.
all were looking to do that. One place had a rink locally, they were kind of the one to put it together, others grabbed on or jumped on. If you look at the swimming one we have, if you don't have a pool, Troy needed student athletes who wanted to swim, so there's a natural connection. If you think of the more typical examples, a football team, you see a lot of those, where the two schools can't support a football program and merge. At this point, I'm not aware of, based on the numbers, any flag football program that's having a hard time fielding 10 to 12 to 15-year-olds and are in need of a merger.
If we vote no on it for current year budget, can that change if more data comes in later with a merger, or would we just put it off for an entire year?
If,
Like, you don't start up like mid-year is what I'm saying, right?
I would strongly caution against that,
Okay.
right?
I'm
Because
just
the point of the budget process is to kind of give to you what we see happening.
Right,
There are obviously things that, a student moves in with an IEP, we have to hire.
right.
I mean, those things obviously happen, and Carrie has some degree of variability built into those things. But I don't know if you want to go into something saying, hey, if this changes, we'll just add it. But whatever, whether it's a class, whether it's a teacher, whether it's an assistant principal, it's not something I would recommend going. I kind of want to have that built at the beginning of your school budget.
It's the question of whether or not this is sustainable and accessible for this year.
Correct.
Well,
Next
this year,
year.
yeah, 25, 26, not
Yes.
24, 25.
The coming year.
Yeah, so not, you know, every month.
Right.
Just to clarify. Teddy, we didn't, the conversation took off, which is fine, that's, it's a discussion. But we didn't want to, no pressure, but if you wanted to say something.
I think it is also very important to like get younger people in that mindset of just like, hey, I'm part of something bigger than myself, and that's pretty cool. But me personally, because I know like for sports this year, people like definitely feel that like not all the sports teams are like treated or like given the same, I don't want to like use the wrong words here, but like kind of treated
Equitably?
Yeah, equitably, I guess, because in that the survey from the fall sports, like a third of the students believed who played sports believed that the teams weren't being treated fairly, which I feel like personally is a big proportion of all student athletes. And like if we're starting up a sport like flag football, I feel like we should start it right. And like if we don't really have the money to like do it like correctly, it wouldn't really go as well as you hope. And like you want it to start off strong, so then the people on the team get like this really good mindset of this is a really fun thing to do, and builds character, and I feel supported, and it's just like overall a really good thing. But if the budget isn't really like moving towards that, I guess, and there will be like, you'll notice that, you'll probably notice that, and then I feel like it's just wouldn't really be great for everyone, and it'll like lower interest, and it'll just kind of slowly deter people away. But that's just my opinion. But, yeah.
They say. Any further discussion? I don't know.
I mean, I would like nothing better than to offer every opportunity and every possible aspect of a positive experience for our students in the community. I know I can honestly say I think that that's true for all of us, which is why we're all sitting here. And my phone telling me to shut up. It's disappointing, and when we are speaking to our elected officials about the importance of equitable funding for our students, and the fact that the state education department continues to pick winners and losers based on where you live, this is just another example of where they leave us with no options for our kids. Because we just can't. And it's tragic. And I feel terrible, but there's nothing we can do.
If there's no discussion, I need a motion to approve the resolution regarding flag football, just with the clarification that the resolution is in a non-recommending stance, if that makes sense. I'll read it. I don't need to. I'm gonna just make it a little bit. So this is the resolution that is, actually, I think I need a motion to put it on the table, right? And then I'll read. I can read it first.
Read it and then we get the motion, yes?
So whereas the Board of Education received a request November 16, 2024 to start a flag football team. No, I'm gonna get too big, I'm using yours. I practice this, guys. Board of Seats, still too small. The Board of Education received a request on November 16, 2024 to start a flag football team as a new spring sport in the 25-26 school year. Whereas the request has been reviewed and processed through the review process in accordance with the district policy to consider the interest in forming such a team, the impact of adding the team might have on compliance with Title IX, the cost of adding such a team to the budget, and the ability of the district to successfully offer and compete in such a new sport. And whereas the process review of all the above considerations is that there is not strong interest among students for adding flag football, adding the new sport in the spring would negatively compete with the existing other 3 high-quality sports offerings for female students in the spring, and the cost of adding such a sport in the current environment of a challenging budget year would not be a wise use of funds. And whereas the superintendent of schools has recommended for the above reasons that flag football not be added as a sport at this time, it is hereby resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent, flag football will not be added as a new sport at this time. So Adam said first, I need a second. Jesse. Sorry. All those in favor of approving this resolution as read? That's unanimous. Thanks, guys. And I do agree with you that it's really, we'll see a positive trend from the state. Okay, I need a motion to approve the Smart Schools Plan as presented during the Smart School Plan hearing of February 10th, 2025. Yes, and Megan. And thank you guys for coming. Any discussion on the Smart Schools Plan? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the Smart Schools Plan? Any against? Michelle, did you want to start schools plans? Yes, no? Any against? And any abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous. I need a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement by between the Eagle Park Central School District and Wildwood School Agreement for the Services in 2025. Megan's first, just second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor?
Which two?
And that is, what's that? Oh, sorry, Just D. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Right, you're Just D and you're Just D.
Yes, I am. Yep.
Okay, that was unanimous, 11. Okay, policy, everyone's favorite topic. We're gonna start with just an informational item, just based on some questions that came up last meeting. And I'm just gonna have Kim Just walk us through a little bit of policy.
I believe it was 2 meetings ago.
Was it 2 meetings?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
it
the
was.
last meeting where we discussed policies, and these questions came up, and this,
And then we skipped last because we didn't want to, yep. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate that. It all runs together. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Sam. This is so the policy committee has asked me to create basically a one-page summary of some of the work that we do. In addition to this item, there are items also in the board portal for you to review related to the policy process. So as you probably know, we subscribe to the NYSBA policy service. So I included here this NYSBA's definition of a policy. So according to NYSBA, policy is broad written guidelines set by the board to chart the district's course of action. And there are 3 types of policies: required, which we have to have, it's state, federal law, regulation. So all school districts are required to have these particular policies. There's local policies that are adopted at the discretion of a board of education. And then the notice policies are intended to inform the public of the district's legal responsibilities and the legal rights of students, teachers, and parents. So when you see those notations, required local notice, that this is what they mean. So just, I guess, an overview of the history. So prior to 2022, and those of you who are on the board probably remember this, we had a process where we did policy review as a full board. I guess you could describe it as onerous at times, for those of you who remember. So because of this, it was decided in 2022 to form a policy committee. The policy committee consists of 3 board members and a district facilitator, which at this time happens to be me. So I just wanted to give a quick kind of review of our process. So, since we now have this policy committee, the way it works is policy documents are received from NYSBA, and they come in 2 different ways. There's quarterly updates that come through board docs quarterly. And then there's also a policy series review, which for those generally come to me, and those are an entire series of policies. So the 6,000s, which were a lot, the 8,000s. What I do with those, either the quarterly updates I pull out of board docs, and we have created a Google Drive folder for the policy committee. So these are all now placed in a shared folder. They're organized by monthly update or the series that we're working on. So those are in our Google Drive. We then meet monthly. We have monthly meetings. And with the Google Drive now, the committee members actually can do some review prior to the meeting, some edits in the shared documents. This gives an opportunity to consider what the NYSBA language is in the policy, make any changes that might, better reflect Averill Park. The documents are then prepared for first reading. That's me accepting the edits, cleaning them up so that they go for first reading. There are times though, before they go to first reading, they do go back to NYSBA. So let's say the committee decides to make a few more substantive changes. Those go back to NYSBA. NYSBA will take a look at them and say, yep, looks good, or here's what I would recommend. So once we get them back, they go to Linda, the board clerk, and she puts them in the board portal for you all to review. Jim, I also send them to Jim for board notes, so they go to the board members in a couple different ways. So those are the finished products that we see on the agenda for board docs. And then finally, it would be, first reading, and you all decide, do we want to adopt, do we want to go to a second reading? So that's just a kind of an overview of the process that we go through. And the second page, what I did, because those of you who weren't here when we did it all together or haven't been on the committee, possibly haven't seen the actual, raw data that comes from NYSBA. So
just wanted to show you what that looks like. So we get these policies and they can contain notations from NISBA. And those notations really inform the work of the policy committee. The committee reviews the notations, edits as necessary to meet the needs of Averill Park, and then the final edited versions are what come to you all. So here's just some examples, and these are, I know I wasn't at the meeting on the January 13th, but I know these were some policies that were reviewed at this time. So I just wanted to show you the notes that we received. So 7,000 is a local policy, and it just says, we have provided this policy to update the current 7,000. They decided we are going to be looking to rescind 7,000.5. And then they say, although this is not a required policy, we encourage the board to adopt policy in this area, which identifies the relationship between facilities development and the board's educational goals. Policies should also establish broad goals for facilities development, designate district administrators responsible for carrying out the goals. And then 7,100, we've retained the main provisions of District Policy 7,100 to outline the board responsibilities related to facilities planning under Part 155 of the Administrator's Regs. So again, this guides the work of the committee. And then finally, the last one from the last meeting, this was one where NISBA said, hey, keep it as it is, it looks okay. In this case, either the committee doesn't change it at all, or maybe the committee might clean up some language or grammar. So just again, I don't know if everyone's seen the actual, raw data that we get. So I just want to make sure that you all were familiar with this. So that's really it for the overview, the summary of the policy process. Thank you.
I have a question for Kim, actually,
Yeah, sure.
since we're talking about the policy process. I know that there's a vast number of required policies. For the ones where they're not required, what is the merit in having necessarily a local policy to sort of lay out? Can we talk about the merits of having, policies beyond what is required by law?
Again, that is really up to a school board and what meets the needs of a particular school district. In the case of our policies, a lot of the work of the committee is, reviewing policies that have been in existence with the advice of NISBA. They do tell us, you can rescind this one. You don't need it. These are not essential. So, I think I'll turn it over to Jesse and Sam and Lauren as the committee, who ultimately makes those decisions.
So we do, most of the time when NISBA recommends that we rescind policies, we actually do take that recommended action. There are the local policies, I think, as in the notes from the 7,000, the beginning of the 7,000 series, is that the local policies reflect the values of the district and also how we want to see the board wants, and the district wants to have oversight over these particular items. In the 7,000 series of facilities planning, we want to make sure that it's a community process, which is why we put the values there. For example, in the 7,100s, we request, I forget exactly how it's termed, that there's input from multiple stakeholders. It's not just the superintendent making broad decisions without input from the community. So that, in my opinion, is why we have local policies, is to reflect the values of the district. And I think they're important for that reason. I don't know if Lauren can say anything.
Obviously, I'm newer to the process, but my understanding too is if we were only ever going to adopt what is required of us, there would be less point of a board. Like New York State would just hand out a manual to all the schools and here's the bare minimum you have to do. And local policies give us the opportunity to personalize it to the specific needs of our community. So like just said in terms of our values, but wherever we can tailor the language to speak specific to what we see here, what we value here, what our needs are. To me, like the more local places where we have ways to personalize, that is the crux of us saying, this is what we've heard from our community and what we feel is important and that we want to codify, I guess, and reinforce, to build scaffolding, to create like longevity for that, instead of just what's the bare minimum that the state tells us that we have to do.
Well, and the way that I look at it is, this means nothing for you, Jim, but Jim may not always be here. And so we are very well aligned with Jim, but in 20 years, hopefully he'll still be here. In 30 years, hopefully he'll still, but
He's like,
forever, Jim will still be here. But even for Jim, when there are decisions to be made and you have, fork in the road, do we build this or do we build that? Or do we spend a little bit more to achieve X, Y, or Z? Then you go back, like a strategic planning document for a private firm, right? I would go into my strategic planning document and say, look, the strategy session we had yielded this focus, and so we're gonna go with decision A. And so for all the decision making that has to happen outside of what is legally mandated, it serves as a guiding document for Jim and his team, and then for whoever comes after, who will no doubt not be as awesome.
I didn't mean to.
Which is why we
Yeah.
need
No, thank you for bringing up that point, and it wasn't, I think that was part of the discussion that prompted some of these questions when we were looking at one of the policies. I think it was like something to the sentiment of, do we need to create a policy about this? If this is something that Jim, for example, already does, that we already granted happens. And so in discussion, us saying, do we need to formalize that? Because it's great that we know that Jim will provide that even if we don't formalize it. But this is important to, enough for us to want that to happen beyond his time here and also our time here. That we're looking at policies, not just like, what do I want to say during my term as board member, but like, is important of the stability that we've built here and some things that Jim has done that is great, that we're like, oh, this is great. We should make sure that that continues to be great and we continue to have that support because we've seen how valuable it is.
I was not in line that we should do away with all
No, not
the things that were
no.
non-regulatory required. My only point in bringing it up was for the benefit of public record in the conversation that we have this open conversation to talk about the merits of having these things for good reason, and not to just only do what is required by law. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
We had 2 policy meetings that talked about, well, how Kim put together this document here, but also with the framework of, why are we doing this? And to your point, Megan, we did discuss it quite a bit in our committee.
And during that same, I think it was 2 board meetings ago, when we were discussing this policy, there was sort of the broad question brought out there is, like, do we have too many policies? And so we took that back to committee and said, well, let's look at that. How many do we have? And what type do we have? Why do we have that? So we can check ourselves as a committee too, based on everybody's feedback to say, well, that's a thing. And when we discuss these local and notice especially, Jess is really great about checking for redundancy to say, do we have something that already speaks to this elsewhere? So can we minimize that? I highlight Jess especially, I think, in the committee is great at doing that, though all of us are tasked with that. She's the best at it. So in terms of taking the feedback that happens during these discussions and for us as a committee to say, all right, well, that theoretical question was posed to us, let's check in on that. How many do we have? How does that compare? Why do we have as many as we do?
Would it be appropriate, segue, to take that into this 12B? So to engage in that second reading, because that is in fact, we got the feedback we got last time was that there was more redundancy in 7,000 and 7,100. And so we took that feedback from you guys
And to be clear, if memory serves, Adam, you had sent some comments via email, but then you weren't there when we had the discussion. So, and then there was a discussion, and so that was part of the reason we said, well, let's wait until everybody's here. Let's go back as a committee and look at that, just to refresh. Yeah.
Adam, did you want to?
Yeah.
So that,
as is
I'm
my
officially opening the second reading.
custom, I make a motion to waive further readings and adopt policy 7100 as written.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Megan, second. Okay, discussion on 7100.
I have, so my, I guess, biggest concern with this is tightening the restrictions on things, when we are already in a tight budget and having to go in and potentially spend more money. Is that the case with any of these?
I don't think so with this one.
Is there like a part of the policy where you feel like that's implied that you're thinking of, or just sort of generally you're wanting to make sure this isn't?
In general, I don't want it to be a financial burden or hardship on the district when we're talking about
No, I
laying off
think if
teachers
anything, it would.
because of a policy.
I think if anything would mitigate that, because it is asking for a level of granularity that would, if you're getting a year, like, we had 2A in that policy, a yearly breakdown of estimated expenses, sorry, so you're taking a fairly fine tooth comb. And again, I think that, the 5-year, the long-term planning is how we save money. I think we've already.
We're required to have that assessment every 5 years by law.
And if I understood the commentary from folks 2 meetings ago, it was in fact like the opposite, not that we were creating more requirements or more expenditures, but if I understood the sentiment correctly, it was like, wait, why are we formalizing this? These are things we do already.
That was part of it. That was part of it. And then also, the balance between what is required and then the redundancies that you talked about. And I think my concern is that we were redundant in some way, but, and I also am very, cognizant of making sure that we all have our say. And I prefer to do these policy discussions when we're all in attendance, because that way everyone's views are able to be heard and in the record.
And Michelle, I just want to point out, one of the things we talked about, so item number 5 in that policy, right, is kind of the whole read all, right? That would design economically feasible facilities that meet student educational needs. So again, when in doubt, when you really are like, oh, can we get this or can we not? Go back to item number 5 and it's not 5, and it has to be economically feasible, full stop. And it's right there in black and white. So having that in there was.
Right, so my concern was like, say, number 3, design facilities for sufficient flexibility to permit program modifications or introduction of new programs. Like, is that making us more liable or exposing us financially to go and modify and change things?
I don't think so, because it's soft in that it says sufficient flexibility.
Okay.
There's no hard definition of what sufficient flexibility is, so
Okay.
gives you latitude.
I just don't want to tie our hands to something when we already
It's a good
are,
concern.
and, and then be like, well, Jim, figure it out, like, Harry, make money back there, like,
No, it's valid. Yeah, your concerns are valid. But I agree with Adam that I think the language is soft enough that it gives us some latitude.
And to speak to your point, Michelle, I think like what the discussion was last time wasn't about financial commitments, but whether or not we were creating more constraints in terms of time limit of reporting on this. And
that was one of the concerns.
Yeah,
That's removed, I see.
Right, yeah, so that was part of the concern of like, there was a sense of like, oh, we already do that frequent of reporting, but we don't want to formalize anything that creates more onerous reporting either.
Any questions?
The
Motion's on the floor.
Motion's on the floor to adopt this as written now with the current edits. Is there any more discussion? It's really good. Okay, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of adopting policy 7100 as written? That is unanimous on that, thank you guys. Okay, second reading for policy 7500, school meeting. Adam?
I'd like to make a motion to waive further readings and adopt policy 7500 as written.
I'll second.
And Megan seconds. Discussion.
I do not want to go down the path of we're authorizing renaming Algonquin because we don't like that. I did not agree with the name change in general. I do not want to expose us to another financial potentially. No, like, I mean, the way I read this is like, what, like, are we saying if Algonquin offends somebody that we're gonna allow the Board of Education to put that out for a rename, like?
No, it specifically says we're not going to rename a building after a person. So it's not asking us to rename a building, it's saying if for whatever reason down the line we build a new building, and it needs a name, or something happens that creates a need for a name change, that we would never select the name of an individual, like, person.
It can't be the Jim Franchini High School.
Right.
That's what this is saying.
No legacy for you.
Before the Jesse's week.
That's right. So we're not putting any conditions under which we would have to change names or like prompting us to change names. It's just saying if we're ever put in a position, we're gonna be mindful to not create a name that speaks to a specific person in the interest of that does put us on the line for more liability, right? Like if we
So
did that for
I
Jen.
wasn't here when we originally started the whole Warriors thing. So who, I guess, how, if we did not have a policy, who took the lead and how did that transition?
State law.
Well, that was a state regulatory.
Right, but from that point, did you take the lead on that and say, okay, let me form the committee or the students or talk with, like, I guess what was the layout, because I was not on the board then.
If I remember correctly, the regulation that came down detailed that the superintendent has to provide a plan to the Board of Education. That included a few things in it. So whenever I did the plan, presented it, and we kind of updated it a couple times.
So the
And it
state
said, like,
dictated that.
Impact on, employer, so there's some steps in there, but that came directly from the
Yeah.
regulation.
And was
This-
outlined by the state.
The state didn't outline the specifics of what you had to do. The state
They
didn't
just
say, you have to take, 10 10th graders and 11 11th graders and, 2 people from the firehouse. It was just the superintendent, like, whatever you can figure out.
Well, and unfortunately in that regard, there was some ambiguity in that because the original instructions as we understood it did not require us to have a plan. And then we were somewhat playing catch up because there was, late instruction that was applied that then we did have to have a plan. But the requirement to make those changes came from the state. And there was discussion on the board. We were included in the discussions, although we did not have, it was, based on the state outline.
So what's the idea from the policy committee to implement this if they were recommending you didn't have one, I guess? You guys just want to circumvent that? I guess what's the idea that this isn't excessive?
Well, the state regulation would override this regardless. I think that this is in the
I'm
absence.
talking about like why with, like what's the purpose of this?
I think we're talking about 2 different things. Guys, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So there's the why and there's the how, right? And so this is just speaking to the how, and Jesse and Lauren, that's my interpretation, is that if some reason arises, or like it did, I don't even know, it was like 3 years ago, in which a name change of something has to happen. And in this case, changing the name of the school, then this is rough guidelines of how that would happen. It's basically like we could call it the Bugs Bunny School if the board chose to do that. We would get input, and if everybody else around there said, yeah, name it Bugs Bunny. So agree, but so it's not it's not us choosing to rename the school. It is,
But
again,
that's,
for whatever
it says
reason.
when the naming or renaming of a school building
is
is
anticipated.
anticipated. Suggestions concerning the name of the buildings shall be solicited from interested residents and employees of the school district by the superintendent of the school.
So that's like the
So-
how.
So for example, if we built a new school building down the line in our
Right,
district.
but it says renaming is what I'm more concerned about,
Naming or
not
renaming.
naming.
So we're not saying, here are the reasons when and how we would choose to rename a building or create a controversy for naming to come up. It's just that this is a common issue that a school district would encounter, right? Like if you built a playground, if there was a building, right? So it's like something that kind of happens in the everyday business of a school. And we're just reinforcing the guardrails of, we're gonna make sure that we don't have a trendy person who's popular and then later find out, you know, whatever, something controversial about, that would open us up to having tribune in the school. And if I'm remembering correctly, this is a policy we already have.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So this is a policy we already have, we just re-evaluated the language to make sure
It's not on there to rescind it.
No, we don't, so we don't need to, if a policy is updated, we just re-adopt it at the new policy. We only rescind ones that we no longer use. So we don't need to rescind.
So we
This
already have
policy.
this policy in.
Correct, we already have this policy as part of our policy documents.
So we review them every,
Well, that's what we're in the process of doing, we're reviewing our whole
right, and it
load of,
takes about, what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
You get from the first one to the last one,
And then
and
you
now it's
start
been
over.
5 years, you start over again, so.
we're not even done with
We're
the
not-
first
I don't
one,
know
but
if
yeah.
it's-
So, so this is our opportunity.
We started in
You know,
2007.
if this is a good policy, to suggest changes. Otherwise, well, we can do it at any time, but 5 years from now, it'll come up again.
Right, but also an answer to his concern, if somebody wanted to utilize this policy to like kind of create a fuss, which, you know, I think is what you're speaking to the concern of, they could do that right now, because the policy is already in our books, and that hasn't been the case.
Okay, well, in the future, are you guys allowed to, or update, like, this is currently already there,
You can,
or
you can
review?
assume,
Like, is it under the exact same number?
yes.
And that's why we did that information, so people know, like, where can I find that, if I have questions about it.
All our policies are listed on board docs, Michelle.
Well, right, but I think it's a valid confusion because we're not replacing and rescinding on this one, but our next item literally rescinds a policy because we're replacing it with 7100. So you're not wrong to be confused because some of them we do rescind in replacement of other policies and others we don't. So I understand where you're coming from in that regard.
Yeah, and that's why we discussed having information, because we're like, this might not be totally transparent or clear unless you're sitting on that committee. Let's make sure we have that discussion so it feels clearer for people to know and see where that is and how that is.
And just to point, so just looking at this particular policy was last looked at in 2004.
It's been a while.
I don't know.
But I mean, there's no changes to make, but we look at it, we're good,
And we re-adopt it.
and we adopt it, and then hopefully don't need it at all.
I don't know procedurally how we do this, but somebody in the,
We don't.
okay, so you'd have to wait until commentary.
Yep.
Thanks. Somebody raised their hand and I just wanted to
Yeah.
acknowledge
Oh,
that
definitely.
when and how
Oh,
they can respond.
It's-
So,
We're getting there.
okay.
We're getting to it.
That's okay, I'll fill out another scenario.
Oh, do you want to fill out another sheet?
You
You can just do it when it's your turn.
I'm super confused right
I
now.
don't wanna waste any time, just talking about this holiday stuff.
It's so much time. Come on.
So yeah, any other discussion or like questions, like that's definitely what we wanted to make sure everybody was on the same board. Because I asked the question like, does everybody sit on the committee or has everybody had the opportunity to do that, so knows how that happens? And we said no, so we should make sure to have this discussion so people know where those are coming from, why we have them, where to look if you have those questions.
Awesome. Right. School name, it's like I say to kids, better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Oh, right, who knew? Okay. I'm not trying to, if we want to keep talking, we keep talking. But if we are good, all those in favor of adopting policy 7500 as written? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you, guys. Good discussion. Okay, I need a motion to rescind policy 7000. Jess D. and then Megan seconds. Discussion again, 7000, 7100 were merged into the new 7100 per your feedback. So I don't need 7,000 anymore. Okay. Any other commentary? Hearing no commentary. All those in favor of rescinding policy 7,000? That is also unanimous. There is an informational piece on work orders that you guys should have seen, which is always good. Second public comment period for items
Adam
not-
has a.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see it.
Comment.
Go ahead.
So on 13A, it's a change order of $10,000 in our favor, which is just because Tony and Mosaic pay really close attention to everything and make sure that they earn their money really well for us. So I just want to give them another shout out.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for putting that up. I will take every $10,000 in there. Okay. Same situation, 3 minutes per speaker. You're invited to make brief comments. The microphone is over there. Jared.
Thanks.
Say that again, Jared.
It's Parker.
Okay.
I'm just actually here on policy night to just make a fuss about a policy that's on the books, just for fun, right?
Policy is fun.
No, I work in public policy, so it's kind of like my thing, so it's kind of exciting, so I was just like, keep mentioning it a little bit. Thanks for giving me a couple of minutes, obviously, the crowd is on the left, but, I'm a parent of a kindergarten student at West Sam Lake Elementary, probably met my wife before. I just want to come up here, I just want to keep the topic fresh, probably everyone's tired of hearing that, but, I thought it might be helpful to color it a little bit with just some relative values across the school district using the enrollment data for the current year to try to help illustrate my concerns and maybe inform the discussion a little bit. First off, I just want to note that the district does manage to maintain a really reasonable kindergarten class size distribution across the district. And the overall kindergarten is the second lowest per class student volume. And currently, that's third grade is the lowest per grade or per class student volume. But this is really in spite of the West Sand Lake situation right now, where the resourcing is a little bit challenged compared to the other two elementary schools. When considering the general education enrollment data, West Sam Lake Kindergarten has got 5.2 more students per class than Miller Hill kindergarten classes. It's the only class at West Sam Lake Elementary to exceed the class size guidelines established by the Board of Ed Policy 4420. It's the only school in the district where kindergarten class size exceeds the class size guidelines. 2.1 more students per class are in this West Sam Lake kindergarten group than the district-wide elementary classroom size average. So they also have the most students per class at West Sam Lake Elementary. That means there's 2.9 more students on average in the kindergarten classes there than the total average class size at West Sam Lake, or 5.8 more students per class than in third grade, and 4.8 more than in fourth grade. So I'm glad that the students at Miller Hill and Postenkill have like slightly better resourcing currently. I know the decision was difficult to drop down to 2 classes for West End Lake this year. But I do hope that it's going to probably help them, or help to facilitate their acclimation to the behavioral and academic expectations of the district prior to advancing to first grade. However, I think the students at West End Lake have been relatively disadvantaged in this way, unfortunately. So as a kindergarten parent at West End Lake, I'm looking at this resourcing distribution discrepancy, and I have concerns, not only because of the chronic academic disruption, which has likely set my child behind relative to her district peers in terms of instructional access. It would also seem as though we should expect no real significant improvement next year unless specific care is taken to address the situation. This is given that among the general ed enrollment for the elementary school district at large, the first grade level for the district has also the most students per class in the district. And overall, the first grade is the only grade level in the district that exceeds the class size guidelines established by Board of Ed Policy 4420. So they have in total, the first grade class, 2.3 more students right now than the district-wide elementary average, and 4.0 more students than per class in the third grade. So that's why I wanted to highlight the text of the current Board of Ed policy 4420, which specifically says, if budgetary, quote, if budgetary constraints or enrollment growth prevent the district from achieving class size guidelines, efforts will be made to meet the guidelines in the following priority order, beginning with grade K, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5 in succession. So despite the relatively plain language of this particular written guidance, the prioritization appears to have been applied, inadvertently, I'm sure, but in reverse order. It's considering on average that grade 5, this is across all of the 3 elementary schools, is 3.7 students below that established policy cap. Grade 4 is 4.9 students below that established policy cap, which actually falls below the policy stated minimum size of 21 students per class. And then the third grade is 3.8 students below this policy cap. So it would appear incumbent upon this board to consider the language of this particular policy to evaluate the potential merit of expanding upon the phrasing, quote, efforts will be made to meet this guideline. Maybe adding some defining language on the term effort, or establishing concrete resource-based interventions that could happen when those planning efforts fail, whether that's due to late enrollments or transportation complications, or what have you. As written, this ambiguity in the text of 4420 right now risks really just rendering this policy functionally optional, or maybe merely aspirational. So depending on what the value is of this board, you may want to consider adjusting the language in 4420. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thank you. Do you feel comfortable leaving your written remarks? There's a lot of data there.
Yeah, I can, it's got a lot of scribbles on it, but.
Or email it,
Yeah,
potentially email it?
The BOE.
Notes all over it. But,
Oh, yeah, if you could, wouldn't mind emailing it.
Sure.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, board member reports. Over to you guys.
So thank you to everyone from the public who came out to speak. I always like hearing when people come to speak. I really enjoyed seeing all of our younger students in here today a little earlier. That was fun. I like when people get involved. I'm not even sure that I knew board meetings were in 5th grade. So that was I just seriously, that was a cool thing to see, and the guts it takes to get up and speak at 10 years old. It's pretty impressive. So I was impressed by that. I think that through all this, I'm learning a lot about policy and government, especially because it's not something that I think taking a sincere interest going to look at. So I've actually really enjoyed what I learned through there. On my end, I don't really have a ton to report. I mean, we had break for a week and we were only here a couple weeks ago, so I'm not sure that I have too much there, but I hope everyone had a nice break.
Along with what Abby said, I really enjoy having people come and talk, especially these past few board meetings, to see members of our community get more involved. It's just really good for us. And then on break, there's really not much going on. I think we started prepping or preparing for Mr. AP, stuff like that. So that's gonna be good. There's a meeting tomorrow during advisory, I think. And then, yeah.
I don't have much to report. The body of work that we've been doing in policy committee, which was a lot of discussion around feedback and how do we bring that information back to the board. You saw tonight, so hopefully that spoke for itself. So that's been a lot of what we've been doing in policy committee to make sure that we're communicating all of that transparently and it makes sense and that we're taking that feedback. And other than that, I have the last chapter of my NISBA trainings to get through from that first year. And I've also been trying to read up on all of the
collection of information NISBA has been sending through to understand all of like kind of the swift and potential policy changes that are being proposed, how they might impact, you know, sort of what needs immediate attention, what doesn't, and where those are in the process. And so that has been very informative for me as a board member, and just wanted to put that out there just in case other people were struggling to understand that information. That NISBA has started sort of like collecting a summary of that. That has been very helpful. So yeah, I've just been doing side work to catch up, learning all of the things that one learns. And that's all.
I just want to go on the record that I'm not completely opposed to girls flag football. It's just a no this year for me because of budget. So I'm hoping that we can get that turned around. They're not here to hear that, sadly, but it did crush me a little bit watching all those little kids walk out. But the good thing is they were very young and we have some time, so I'm pulling for them. So no other reports.
I just want to say that I appreciate Heath kind of giving an in-depth response to the questions about music that came up. And really all of the staff and administration, whenever there's a question coming from the community or from us, I think that all of the staff take time to go into a more in-depth response and make us be more informed, which I appreciate, because all we can do is take the information we have and make the best decisions using that information. I want to echo Michelle's sentiments. It's not no on football forever. I also am glad that the girls came and wanted to participate in the meeting and also understand the process. But at this point, with already, I'm understanding it correctly, 1.6 million more in cuts, I cannot support funding something else if we're going to be cutting more academic programming now or probably ever. So that's unfortunate, but I do hope that that we have the funding for it in the future.
Yeah, so the flag football thing, that's the worst. These kids come in asking for something that's good, and we really can't give it to them. There's really two reasons why I volunteered to make the people motion there. The first is around the survey data, which is the only data that we have, and you've on the data guide. So Jim, there's probably hundreds of girls that were eligible for that survey, and we got 60 responses, and more than half of those 60 responses said that they indicated some interest. But it's only 60 out of hundreds, and it, by definition, has a propensity to be geared towards the people that are interested. If I got a survey that said, hey, flag football, I'm not interested in that, I'm just gonna delete it. So I don't know if there's a better way that we can gather data on this in the future. I have no ideas, but that would be really helpful. But the main reason that I said this isn't the year for it is because, like, we're representing our taxpayers and we're gonna go ask them for the maximum tax increase we can for a simple majority. And I can't tell them, oh yes, we're raising your taxes and we're cutting a whole bunch of staff and we're adding flag football. It just doesn't feel like the right thing. So it's a Sophie's Choice year again, thanks to the New York State budget. So I'm sorry we're in this position, but that's where we are.
I echo my colleagues on the board that I would like nothing better than to offer that opportunity, and I hope that it comes before us again and we're in a situation to approve it next time. I will include this, as I promised, in our advocacy efforts, because this is just another example of something that we can't address because the state does not properly fund us. So I do appreciate the folks from the community coming out. I encourage people to stay engaged. It's important to stand up and say something, but it's also important to keep standing up and keep saying something. You have to just keep coming. I want to congratulate our varsity wrestling team, because we had 10 wrestlers from our varsity team make it to sectionals. Several of those wrestlers placed in first or second in their weight class. And we have 3 wrestlers who are also seniors who are advancing to states, which is this weekend. So I want to give special recognition to Jacob Hanlon, who's a senior, Reese Bunny, who's a senior, and Alex Salisbury, who is a senior. And I want to wish them all the best for their competition this weekend. I hope they crush it. They do us proud every day. And I'm super excited for them this weekend. And just, we've entered the 3rd quarter. We're in the home stretch, guys. Spring is coming. Just, keep going and doing your best. Our students are exceptional, so very proud to represent them.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note on the celebrations of success, which it was our last board meeting was 2 weeks ago. One of those weeks was school break, and we still had, I didn't recall, I didn't time it, how long, but there was still so much going on. And that is, I think, due to the wonderful teachers and staff and administration we have here. We are a world-class district, and it continues to show despite the adversity we have with our budget. So again, kudos to everyone and thank you. And I also just want to say, do please keep advocating in Albany for us, for our students. I feel like our students are the state's most valuable resource, and we really need to continue to support them.
So you guys definitely took some of what I was gonna. We do have an advocacy day coming up, and this is definitely kind of fuel for that. And like I said, I would encourage everybody to speak out. I just wanted to say one thing about, we did have a meeting since the high school music cabaret production, and I was able to toot their horn back then. I just want to say again, in the ensuing time, having spoken to one of the ODP officers, performers, actually multiple performers said to me that it was, because it was fraught and the weather was not cooperating at all. And we got one phenomenal show out of it. And just to keep it on the positive, despite it not being Hamilton or Les Mis or anything, these students said to me that it was actually the coolest theatrical production that they participated, the level of participation and agency that they had in creating the show, not just reading the lines, was a next level for them. And so, there was some discussion as to whether they're not doing a real musical, when in fact they had more, and I don't know what, Abby attended what you guys heard, but what got back to me was that they really were super jazzed about the level of participation and creativity that they were able to engage in this style of show. And so writing your own show, I was like, I don't even know where to begin. And so I just wanted to point that out, that could be lemons or it could be lemonade, and it was most definitely lemonade in that case. And just while I'm on the arts kick, there's some good stuff coming up. There's a high school concert coming up. There's AMS musical coming up, and so try and get out for those because they're usually fun. That's all I got. And it was great to hear from everybody. I definitely I'm on the same page with you guys on basketball. So fingers crossed. If you're listening, Kathy. All right. Megan, did you listen? Motion. Okay, I just need a second for that. Anybody? Lauren, beat you to that. Lauren, second.